Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. Welcome to the class again, one more time. Let's continue with the ESI Act now. We found that what is a factory? Right? In the last class, I think we completed up to this term. What is a factory? Factory has been defined in section 2, subsection 12 of the ESI Act as any premises including the presence thereof, right? The presence means the compound where the allied activities of the factory, say like administrative functions, etc., that's being carried out, that also should be considered as a factory. A factory is a building where manufacturing happens, and also the presence, the support activities that happen within the premises. That's also called as factory, where 10 or more persons are employed. This is more important. Where 10 or more persons are employed or were employed on any day of the preceding 12 months. So it means that in the preceding 12 months, if there are 10 or more people employed and any part of the manufacturing process which is carried on or ordinarily so carried on but does not include a mine subject to the operations of the Mines Act or a railway running shed. So it means that where if 10 or more people are employed in any given point of time in the preceding 12 months, and that premises is called as factory, where there should be if the manufacturing happens, manufacturing need not happen in the entire factory, or a portion of the building can be used for manufacturing, then the entire premises or the presence will be termed as factory. Now, there are two different types of employers what we will deal here. One is an immediate employer, the other one is a principal employer. I can explain this through an example. Many companies, they operate through contract laborers, right? A factory, let's take for example a factory which employs not only the direct people who are employed in the factory, but also have got other support functions like security guards, drivers, etc., which they normally don't deploy as into the factory payrolls, but give it to a subcontractor. Like there are a lot of security agencies which operate, right? So the security agency will supply manpower to the factory to guard the premises of the factory. Now, the manpower is deployed by the security agency on the premises of the factory or the establishment, right? So now the factory or the establishment will be called as the principal employer, and the agency which is hiring them and deploying them will be called as immediate employer. See, for example, I work for a security agency and I am deployed in a particular factory to guard the premises. Means my immediate employer will be the agency which has hired me, and my principal employer will be the factory where I am put in as a guard to safeguard. So the immediate employer is the person who is hiring, and the principal employer is the person who on whom the services has been given, or who is taking the services, right? So section 2 subsection 13 defines the immediate employer. Section 2 subsection 13 defines the terms immediate employer. So in relation to employees, employed or through him, you have to understand these words, right? Employees employed by or through him. So it means that it might be direct employment, or through that person, the person can be deployed in any places. So on the premises of a factory or an establishment where the act applies, or it can be under the supervision of the principal employer or his agent, right? On the whole or any part of the work which is ordinarily part of the factory or establishment where the principal employer is covered. Now, that includes an agent or a contractor. Okay. Now, what is an insured person? Insured person, section 2 subsection 14 defines an insured person as a person who is or was an employee in respect of whom contributions or were payable under the act, right? Or who is entitled for any benefits that is what are the benefits that's applicable, we will look into the subsequent classes. But insured person is a person or who was employed in respect of a factory or establishment which is covered under the act, on whom the benefits of the employment are covered by this act, on whom contributions are paid or were payable under the act, right? So the person should be an insured person who is an employee in respect of and on whom the contributions are paid or were payable under the act, and who is entitled to the benefits under the act. So, what is a permanent partial disablement? The act per se is being covered to cover the sickness or the workshop related factory accidents, etc., etc. That's the basic premises why this act came into force, right? To cover the employees on long-term sickness or short-term sickness, etc., etc., and pass on the benefits of the act, right? So, section 2, subsection 15A defines the expression permanent partial disablement. Permanent partial disablement means a person has gotten partial disablement which is not temporary in nature but permanent nature. Unfortunately, like if a person working in a factory or an establishment met with an accident and thereby the person has gotten permanent injury on either any part of the body, then that's called permanent but a partial disablement, because the partial disablement might enable the person to continue to the work, not in the same capacity but on a different level, different capacity, right? Of an employee in every establishment which he was capable of undertaking at the time of the accident resulting in the disablement, because such disablement of a permanent nature as reduces the earning capacity of an employee. So, suppose a person is working as an labor on the machines, right, which is manufacturing some XYZ material. So, a person is working as a labor on the machine, and due to an unfortunate sickness caused out of the working continuously on the machine, if the person has gotten permanent sickness and the person is unable to continue the same employment and probably put into a lesser employment which reduces the earning capacity of the person, then it is called permanent partial disablement. The person is disabled, permanently disabled, but not fully, but only partially. It does not disable a person from employment altogether, but it reduces the earning capacity of the member. Okay, that's called permanent partial disablement. So the injuries which is classified as a permanent partial disablement can be found in schedule uh, in part 2 of the second schedule, and okay, that is not relevant for our purpose of this class, but obviously I can recommend the students to go through the act in detail, a bar act in detail, and see what are all the things, just as only for learning purpose. Go through second schedule of part 2 just to understand what is covered under there, and nothing more, nothing less there, right? But for the purpose of class and for the purpose of the exam, this is not relevant. If we understand like it is covered as part of part 2 of second schedule, that is enough. Every injury specified in part 2 of second schedule shall be deemed to result in permanent partial disablement. This might be an one word question, right? What is permanent total disablement? Section 2, subsection 15b defines a permanent total disablement. Such disablement, which is permanent in nature and incapacitates an employee for all work which he was capable of performing at the time of accident in such disablement. So the permanent partial disablement shall be deemed to be result from every injury specified in part 1 of second schedule, or combination of injuries in part 2 and part 1 of the percentage of loss of earning capacity as specified in the said part against those injuries amounts to 100% or more. Part 1 of the second schedule defines what are all the injuries which will be treated as permanent total disablement, which will enable the person to do, which will incapacitate a person of an employee for all work which he was capable of performing before the accident or before the sickness. So, permanent partial disablement is reducing the earning capacity of an employee in every employment which he was capable of undertaking before this at the time of accident, resulting in the disablement. Permanent total disablement is such a disablement which makes which is permanent in nature and incapacitates an employee for all work he was able to perform, he was capable of performing at the time of accident, and the details of which are covered in part 1 of second schedule. Now, we saw who's an principal employer as well as an immediate employer and brief, right? So, section defines this. Uh, Section 2, subsection 17 defines a principal employer. We saw temporary employer again earlier. So, immediate employer earlier. Again, the definition is very clear. The principal employer is the owner or occupier of the factory and includes a managing agent, the legal representative of a deceased owner or occupier. Okay. Okay, we'll look at it. This is more important legislation. Many cases, this legislation will come in. Manager of a factory and who is the occupier of the factory, etc. This is a very interesting, and more cases are there against this. More case laws definitions are there in this. We'll look into this in detail separately. So, but the principal employer is also the manager of the factory under the Factories Act 1948, right? So basically, a person responsible for the supervision and control of the establishment is a principal employer. What is a seasonal factory? Again, this is more important here. Section 2, subsection 19A defines the term seasonal factory. If a factory is engaged in exclusively in any one or more of the following manufacturing process, namely cotton ginning, cotton or jute pressing, decortications of groundnuts, manufacture of coffee, indigo, lac, rubber, sugar including gur or tea, or any manufacturing process which is incidental to or connected with any of the aforesaid process, and includes a factory which is engaged for a period not exceeding 7 months in a year. So, a seasonal factory is an establishment which is engaged in the manufacturing process of cotton ginning, cotton or jute pressing, decortications of groundnuts, manufacture of coffee, indigo, lac, rubber, sugar, tea, and sugar including gur, or any manufacturing process which is incidental to or connected to the any of the aforesaid process. So it means that any establishment which is supporting this manufacturing activities will also be called as seasonal factories. And also, a factory which is engaged for a period of not exceeding 7 months in a year is also called as a seasonal factory. And in any process of blending, packing or repacking of tea or coffee, or any other manufacturing process as the central government may notification specify. So, cotton ginning, cotton or jute pressing, decortication of groundnuts, manufacture of coffee, tea, indigo, lac, rubber, sugar, including gur, and any of the allied or incidental or connected manufacturing process relates to these factories, and any factory which is not which is engaged for a period not exceeding 7 months in a year. That includes process of blending, packing and repacking of tea or coffee. All these things are called as seasonal factory as per section 2 subsection 19A. Now, the last one in this employer-employee relationship is the temporary disablement. What is a temporary disablement? Section 2 subsection 21 defines the term temporary disablement. It means any injury that is making an employee not enabling an employee to perform the particular activity which the person is capable of doing before the accident for a short period. For a short period, including incapable of doing work which he was doing prior to or at the time of injury. So that's called a temporary disablement. Now, wages. wages. Section 2, subsection 22 defines the term wages. Wages means all remuneration paid or payable to an employee in cash to an employee. If the terms of the contract of employment express or implied and includes any payment to an employee in respect of any period of authorized leave, lockout, strike, which is not illegal, or layoff, and any other additional remuneration, if any, paid at intervals not exceeding 2 months, but does not include wages, does not include any contribution paid by employer to a pension fund or a provident fund, any traveling allowance, any sum paid to a person employed to defray special expenses entitled to him, right? Or any gratuity payable on discharge. Like wages does not include contribution of the employer to the provident fund or pension fund, any traveling concession or traveling reimbursement, that's allowance that's been given to the employee, any sum paid to defray special expenses, or any gratuity payable on discharge. So these are all the things which does not include or which is not part of the wages as defined by section 2 subsection 22 of the Act. Now, the following are treated as wages. These things should be included as part of wages. LIC premium subsidy, any subsidies for that matter, right? LIC premium subsidy is a factory or an establishment is paying an employee a subsidized premium, then that subsidy should be treated as part of the wages. House rent allowance, heat, gas or dust allowance, and incentive allowance, incentive bonus, and overtime allowance. All these things should be included as part of the wages. Right? Hope this is clear. Now, we are done with the definitions now, and we will go through what is an employee state insurance corporation, how it is established, etc., and who are all members, etc., how it is constituted, etc., in the subsequent class. Hope you have got some understanding of the definitions of it. Please go through these classes and come back to me at babupriya@rediffmail.com, and I'll try to clarify the doubts if you have anything immediately. Thank you, friends, and have a great and wonderful day.